Chancellor appeared to indicate that the government knowingly laid wrong or misleading estimates before the House on Thursday last week.
The British Parliament's atmosphere went haywire for a bit when Chancellor Rachel Reeves left the chambers after Member of Parliament Paul Holmes called her out for misleading the public with her incorrect reports.
Madam Deputy Speaker, on a point of order, could I raise a significant issue that I'm concerned about in relation to the Chancellor of the Exchequer's statement earlier today? In her remarks, she obviously doesn't want to stay here to hear this.
Now, there's a pretty shocking context to this kind of reaction from Paul Holmes and the rest of the opposition, which raised commotion after Chancellor Rachel Reeves announced new tax rises with a plan to save £5.5 billion. She said,
"But today I am making the difficult decision that those not in receipt of pension credit or certain other means-tested benefits will no longer receive the winter fuel payment from this year onwards."
Well, Rachel Reeves believes that the expenditures of the last government left a hole worth £22 billion, as some departments secretly overspent more than what they reported.
We have inherited a projected overspend of £22 billion. A £22 billion hole in the public finances now.
She attacked the last government's failed Rwanda plan that cost them more than £6.4 billion.
They spent like there was no tomorrow because they knew that someone else would pick up the bill.
But what's more worrisome for the people is the plan projected by Rachel Reeves to cover this kind of cost while implementing their manifesto to not balance the books on the backs of hardworking people and hardworking taxpayers. Well, that is good for the working class, but the deficient budget, followed by the promises to increase pay for public sector workers, is bound to come at a cost of some big cuts to road and hospital projects and the winter fuel allowance for 10 million pensioners. This accusation of over-expenditures, followed by the budget plan, had many ex-ministers raging as they considered it more of a political choice to pay rises for public sector workers. So, this decision was bound to receive some criticism, but as soon as MP Holmes was about to start his point of order, Reeves left the Parliament without listening to his part. Paul continued with his speech, highlighting a discrepancy in the datasets provided by the government in front of Parliament House on different occasions. According to the MP, the intention behind the act was to mislead the Parliament. Reeves had in fact left a giant gap between the two financial estimates that she provided a second estimate which had a £22 million difference from the first report passed by her earlier week. The same point was discussed by MP Holmes during the session, as well as after he left the matter to the chairwoman's hands and called for immediate action.
This is a serious concern, Madam Deputy Speaker, if true. So what steps can we take to ensure that the government either retracts the estimates laid or the document that they produced today? And can you tell me whether this possibly constitutes a breach of the ministerial code?
While no action was taken at that moment, as Reeves had left even before the matter was being heard, the chairwoman issued a warning to the chancellors to take care of the irregularities that were found in the matter. Well, this budget became more of a political blame game for both sides, who were keen on saving themselves from the backlash the new taxes are going to receive. Not to mention, the public needs to know the real elements that have made the situation this worse for the British people, and the chancellors from both parties are keen on deflecting the blame to the other side. Jeremy Hunt, with his legacy on the line, did the same as he countered back, claiming that it was the Labour Party who hid the truth from the public.
Now, in a U-turn that will forever shame this Labour government, she is laying the ground to break her word. And when she does, her first budget will become the biggest betrayal in history.
Now, the real point of concern was the reason why the readings were wrong. While explaining the possible reasons for the erroneous report, Hunt had raised questions about how the government published the estimates that were wrong when Rachel Reeves had already been presented with the state of public finances immediately on her arrival at the Treasury weeks before. Following Jeremy Hunt was Paul Holmes, who also raised the point of the readings in the Parliament, and this question was certainly troublesome for Rachel Reeves, and perhaps she knew she had it coming. That's why she decided to leave before the issue was raised once again. Now, Paul has not troubled the opposition for the first time with his questions and notions. Aside from mentioning the government's errors, Holmes is quite vigilant in talking about Hamble Valley's issues and problems, which is the jurisdiction from which he was elected as a Member of Parliament.
And in Hamble Valley, Liberal Democrat Eastleigh Borough councillors built over the last few years double the number of houses required by targets and assessments. So can the Secretary of State confirm that she will take into account retrospective building numbers for those areas who have already built more than their fair share?
One such issue was the house building plans, which Paul inquired about from Angela Rayner, throwing her in a fix as she had to explain her approach to meet the country's house building targets.
Why is she placing even more pressure on local services in the southeast where house prices are the most expensive, but leaving cities alone and not increasing house numbers there too?
The debate came following Rayner's plans to build 1.5 million new homes by 2029. She reinstated the targets while saying that it won't be without controversy, as it happened. Holmes' question was highly relevant, as the plan details show that the quota for the cities was substantially lower than that for the southeast areas. Regarding the plan, the Secretary talked through the house building plans while reassuring that the projects would be carried out throughout the country. Now, that does not mean that Holmes has never stood up for anything before. In a parliamentarian session during the COVID, when the patients were facing problems of not being able to have an appointment with their general physician face-to-face, Paul urged the health secretary to ensure that general physicians were open to more face-to-face appointments with patients.
Deputy Speaker, like my honourable friend, the member for Watford, can I just emphasise to the Secretary of State the amount of anger there is in Eastleigh about not being able to get a face-to-face appointment with their GP?
Several angry complaints were made about the lack of service and appointments with the GPs, even though the world had come out of the COVID-19 restrictions phase.
The Secretary of State stood at the dispatch box now and encouraged GPs to get back to work. If necessary, and that uptake hasn't happened, will he instruct them to get back to work so that we have face-to-face appointments for my constituents?
Now, Paul Holmes was also as sharp as ever when he inquired the new government about their plans to use the funds allotted by the previous government for the upgrades of remote train stations, such as Swanwick and Hedge End stations, which line his constituency. However, the response was once again a circular blame game, as usual, and that is to undermine the capabilities of one another, while the public, in this cruel facade's aftermath, suffers. Now, this is a pattern we have seen in most of the parliamentarian sessions, as these parties try to sabotage each other without giving a mutual thought to the welfare of the public.